We all long for a vacation on a remote island, but none of us has access to it right now. You need a plane or a boat or a bridge in order to reach the island. When I first heard about accessibility, I've got a feeling that accessibility is comparable to an island you want to reach, but you can only reach it if you've got the tools to build that bridge so that anyone can access the island. With my presentation, I want to give you the tools. Back then, my first question was how to make sure that our websites and components are accessible. And then I've started. I did some researches, some tutorials, visited webinars, and did audits and so on. Soon I've realized that this is not going to help the team to deliver accessible components, and their website are still not accessible. It was a try and error situation and quite frustrating. I've experienced often that accessibility does not gain the focus as it should, not at the beginning and not even in the middle of a project. Unfortunately, the reason for accessibility is either the Equal Opportunity Commissioner or a missed government tender. This even happened to one of our clients, and then all of a sudden, accessibility has the highest priority. But when accessibility is implemented correctly from the beginning, it will actually save money. According to CFATH, an international legal firm in the US, there are on average monthly more than 150 website accessibility lawsuits. We all know that lawsuits are an immense cost expenditure and also bad for the reputation. That means you lose money and users. I've learned that everyone benefits from accessible websites, and there's a part of users who depend on accessibility. The European Accessibility Act is a directive that aims to improve accessible products, services, and websites. And they want to guarantee that common rules on accessibility in the European Union by removing barriers, and also private organizations will be made responsible, including online stores and banks. Soon, this will also affect more and more big companies, and it will become law and must be applied from July 2025. In my opinion, these days, big companies can't afford to exclude users from using their websites. Also, companies shouldn't feel forced to look into accessibility because of having fear of lawsuits, but simply because everyone, either with or without disability, shouldn't experience discrimination. My name is Rafi, and I'm going to share with you my experiences on how I've specified accessible components and all the challenges I've encountered on the way to do so. But let's take a briefly look into the WCAG. It means Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which comes from the W3C and helps to ensure making websites accessible. It can be also used as a legal document, and they introduce 3 conformance levels. A is good and AAA is the best. But in my opinion, we should aim for at least AA. Currently, in the most projects, when it comes to specifying accessible components, it looks like this. But to make sure that components are implemented correctly and accessible, I recommend to have it more like this. I don't want you to read this slide. I just want to point out the main aspects when it comes to specifying accessible components. Logic is there to describe the behavior and feature of an accessible component. The keyboard is crucial for a blind person who wants to interact with the component via the keyboard. Areas there to make non-semantical HTML components accessible to screen reader users. And specifying the screen reader part is there to describe what a screen reader must announce when it comes to interaction with a component. On the top right, you see the design part, and that's a centralized guideline for designers and content editors regarding visual styling of a website. I'll explain you how I came to this from not knowing how to start to a finished accessible component. It wasn't an easy journey, but my goal here is to make it easier for you, like using a machete to pave the way on this jungle island. You don't have to reinvent everything from scratch. That's why I was looking for best practices. And it was also for me the easiest way to get started. The first document I was looking into was the WCAG. It's from the W3C, consists of over 70 guidelines and helps to make website accessible. But it's not easy to understand and also hard to map to components. Then I found LICast. That's a tutorial from Google Chrome devs that helps to teach accessibility fundamentals, but they're also not focusing that much on components. Why tutorials? It's also from the W3C and helps to meet the WCAG standards on a component basis, but unfortunately for not more than 5 components. eBay Mind assists front end in building accessible e-commerce websites and components, but they're only focusing on eBay components, as you can imagine. But I have to admit that I love their examples because it's easy to follow. Authoring practices, also from the W3C, is for me the undisputed winner because it's the best in all 4 categories when it comes to specifying accessible components. So within the authoring practices, the second step followed, and I looked into the logic part. For specifying a component, you look within the authoring practices in the 3rd chapter, design pattern and widgets. There you find a whole table with specified components, and you can compare and map it to your customized ones. After doing the logic part, I was looking into the keyboard. The keyboard part is important, especially for power users and screen reader users. Because if the keyboard interaction of a component is not specified, that means that it's not accessible. That's why it's super important to specify this as well. I found 2 valuable resources which helped me to specify essential keyboard strokes for accessibility. The first one I was looking into was the Web AIM keyboard testing. It's a table, and if you don't have enough time, it's nice to have a quick overview. The second one is also from the authoring practices, and it's there for a deep dive and gives you detailed information about keystrokes. So it depends on your use case, which one you prefer. After specifying this, I was looking into ARIA. I don't know how you feel, but when I heard about ARIA the first time, I had many questions on my mind. So let's see if I can answer all your questions, and if not, please remember to ask me those questions in the question round. ARIA is a technical specification also introduced from the W3C to ensure that non-semantical HTML components become accessible. And this is especially useful or crucial for users who depend on assistive technology. For example, this Braille device you see on the image can be seen as an assistive technology. It helps blind users to interact with the website, but it's not limited to those. There are also screen readers, speech recognition, eye tracking devices, and much more. In general, you use ARIA to make non-semantical HTML accessible. An example is when you use span or div tags to create a component, and you do some wild things with JavaScript too. Those components can't be conveyed to screen reader users, so use, whenever it's possible, semantical HTML. Because areas often only needed if you don't use it, if you don't specify with semantical ones. In the previous slide, I've talked about semantical and non-semantical HTML. Here's a simplified example of a semantical radio button. And as long as we mentioned the type, the role, the value, the name, and its date, everything is all right, and the screen reader will announce the relevant information about the radio button properly. It will sound something like that. Mrs. Smith selected radio button 1 of 2. Here is another example of a non-semantical component, also a radio button, but something is missing. Can you spot it? Yes, it's the state. And right now, if a title is selected, the user don't know what is selected exactly. How can we fix this? By simply adding an area attribute, and in this case, it's area checked, to make sure that everything is announced in the correct manner and the user knows exactly what is selected. So I hope you get a feeling why area is important and when to use it. If so, let's jump into the next part, the design part. And let's see why the design part is also so important. According to the Laser Eye Surgery Hub, it's estimated that around 2.2 billion people worldwide live with some form of visual impairment. When I first heard this, I was quite shocked because those numbers shows the importance of visual styling of a website. With this, I like to show you how someone with a severe form of visual impairment perceive a page. It's something can be like this. So whenever you have to specify something which is related to the design, I strongly recommend to look into the WCAG, searching for the guideline 1.4. And there you find many helpful resources how to make it easier for a user to distinguish content. I wanted to show you something else. To give you an example here, why design is also important, here's a form that I filled out recently, but something is wrong here, and I'm asking you if you can spot it. All right, how about now? You notice that the email address field is underlined red, and it's signifying that's invalid. But to a colorblind person, this message would not be conveyed. And to fix this, we simply add an error message to make sure that this critical information is also conveyed. So whenever you see something where you rely too heavily on colors, try to watch out for that and provide multiple avenues like a message. As you've seen in my presentation, there's a lot of interesting facets to look into to achieve accessibility. It's worth considering if you're specifying a component. We saw in the first part that the authoring practices is an extremely useful resource to specify accessible component, and not only because the behavior is mentioned and described, but also because the keyboard interactions are also described. We've learned that the semantic markup is critical to assistive technology uses. And with the proper design, we can also ensure consistent experiences for all of our users. So keeping all that in mind, that means that our final website is going to reach more users and those have also a better experience and a better time using our websites. Here's a list with the most problematic issues I found during my accessibility audits in our projects. Navigation. I've seen that sometimes skip links are missing, but skip links are helpful to bypass the navigation because it's annoying if you tap through the navigation again and again whenever a page is refreshed. Image. Provide always alternative text for images because whenever you want to make sure that the content of the image should be conveyed to a user, no matter if it's a screen reader user or a sighted user, write it down. Because, for example, if you're a sighted user and the image is broken, it's helpful if you have an additional text which describes what the image is about. Multimedia. Often I see that captions or transcripts are missing, but those are crucial for screen reader users. Otherwise, they don't get the chance to know what this video is about. Design. If you suffer from a visual impairment, you would leave a website immediately because you're not able to read the content, and you'll probably leave the website. And because we don't want to lose users, take the design part seriously. Forms. Always provide labels. I know most of us are doing it, but if not, it's pretty annoying and confusing because screen reader users don't know what they're focusing right now. Also make sure that the placeholder within an input field, for example, is not announced by a screen reader because it's confusing if the placeholder is announced. I hope you get the importance of accessibility when it comes to specifying component. And if not, and if I see, again, a component which is not specified to our accessibility standard, you'll get a slight slap. Feel free to ask questions and visit our accessibility channel, our wiki page, internal wiki page, and feel free to ask me if you have any questions. We're happy to see our community growing. And I've prepared a handout for, just for a briefly summary with the most important information of my presentation. Thank you. I'm finished.